All right, so this is from 4 wheels to 2 engineering principles to build big features, launch them successfully, and riding home in style. This is about how we at Lyft built a scooter share program into our app. So who am I? I'm RJ. I'm from San Francisco, California. You'll notice I say hella sometimes, like I spent 9 years on Android. That's a pretty hella long time. I've been at Hulu, I've been at Google, and for the last couple years, I've been rocking it at Lyft. I love making pour-over coffee, which you'll notice a couple times in these slides. You'll find me on the mountain snowboarding or hiking. And above all, I really love shipping cool Android apps. And honestly, like, seriously, it's a dream to be talking here. I've always wanted to speak at droidCon, and I've always wanted to give back to the community. But honestly, I never really knew how it would contribute. Like, I'm on stage, I'm pretty nervous right now. I don't write a lot of open source projects. I don't really focus on a lot of core, framework stuff. But I have really struggled with recycler view in the past, like a lot. Like I think we all have. But I never thought that struggle qualified me to get on stage and tell you about recycler view. But I've always used that in the pursuit of the things that I really love, which is building and shipping awesome Android experiences that people pick up and use in moments of time. And the actual process of that is what I really want to share. Because what I think that is about product engineering. And that's the focus of building and shipping for real humans in real situations. And that's not to say that any of the other talks here, they're incredible, and they're used all throughout this talk. But I'm trying to bring this from the other side of things, trying to focus on that. And even though I'm going to be talking about a really big team and a really big project, well, a smaller team, but I hope this is going to all be applicable, because this is about human engineering. Y'all ready? OK. So let me set the stage. I have to make sure we're all aware. Lyft is a major ride-sharing company in North America. We launched in 2012. Our mission is to improve people's lives through the world's best transportation. And our vision is how we can better reinvent cities around people and not cars. And that is a bit of a challenge in the United States. We're very car-centric. But I joined because I was super passionate about public transportation and getting people alternate ways around their cities. So, early 2018, we noticed a new trend emerging in a lot of West Coast cities around the United States. These scooters were gaining popularity. People would go up and down the beaches on them, but they would just kind of check them out on their phone, and they would go and ride around and unlock them again and move around their lives. And this really piqued our interest, because we really thought this aligns really uniquely with our vision as a company of transportation. And then, in about June 2018, this very, very exciting opportunity kind of landed in my lap. Let me set the stage. We wanted to provide a scooter sharing service to our Lyft users. We had to do everything from scratch. And this unique deadline, we had 2 months to do it. So I was pretty psyched, but I was mostly terrified. Because there's another big thing to remember here, which is we're a ride-sharing company. And everything we have done in the past was oriented towards ride shares, getting you a ride, and we have never considered a scooter. And not only that, but this entire time, we cannot risk that product in pursuit of these scooters. So if I was going to make this happen, I needed to make every single moment of time count. I needed to stitch together every single thing I had done the last 8 years of my Androiding experience to make this happen. And I needed to bring full awareness so that every single moment I was doing something, it was meaningful, it was the right thing to do, and I wasn't wasting any time. So when I'm faced with moments like these, I'm going to keep saying this a lot, I pause. I step back. The first question I asked is, what is success here? And that's actually kind of ambiguous, but I can really tell you what's not success. And that would be, we missed the deadline. We're too slow, we don't ship in time. But the exact inverse of that is we move too fast, and we launch something that's not stable, it's not functional, it crashes. The unique thing we had to do at the time as well was we had to make sure we weren't disruptive because we had an existing company doing all sorts of things, and we couldn't get in their way. But then the final thing that really scares me the most is we go through all this Herculean effort. We burn through so many hours, and what lands on the user's feet is something they don't even want. So then, if I brand it like that, success from an engineering standpoint is going to be balancing speed of development with the reliability of our code. But then, there's this extra dimension, which is where I think product engineering comes in, which is that the outcome of this whole process is actually going to be useful and engaging to our users in solving something they really want to do. So, as an engineer, what is useful? I think of this as people problems. People problems, we build apps, but building apps is a human process. We have humans around us. We themselves, I'm a human, but the users who use it are also. And we use technical solutions to solve these people problems. And whenever I find myself solving a technical problem for the sake of it, I have to catch myself. But also, we had to admit that this entire process was fraught with ambiguity, uncertainty, and subjectivity. We had to set aside right and wrong because we were operating in a space where there really wasn't any. And I think this is really the core of what it meant to be a product engineer. So then, we came up with these principles that were going to guide this 2 months. Actually, we kind of came up with them later on. We had them in our head, but we were kind of moving too fast. This is for large-scale development of brand new features, but I really, really hope any team of any size can make use of these in any situation. And they are. Stay simple, stay lean. Reimagine over reinventing. And listen, learn, and launch what matters. So I'm going to tell the story of Lyft scooters, how we met that deadline, spoiler alert. But I also want to make sure that there's an overall message that comes through here that anyone can take away with. Ready? Stay simple, stay lean, effectively build as little as possible, which I like. We kind of heard two sides when we were starting out, which is like, look, you've got this existing rideshare, we cannot touch that. But the other thing was, we needed to move fast. So we needed to find the space for us to execute really quickly in that wasn't going to risk that. So anytime I'm going to go about starting a feature, anywhere at all, I'm going to be like, great, I'm going to put it behind a feature flag. These are great. They're going to tell you analytics about your feature. They're going to gate whether or not people can see it. You're going to be able to A/B test and understand behavioral differences as a result of that. But honestly, with a feature of any substantial size, you're going to have code in a lot of other places. Places like background services. Places like routing flows of how you navigate to and from different parts of your app. Your database layer, your data transfer layer. For us, uniquely, we had things like ride history and we had settings. They were spidered about the app. But we couldn't build fast and effectively if we didn't have a safe place to live in. So we took feature flags one step further, and we used feature modules. So a feature module, in a lot of ways, we're talking about Gradle modules here, but we had one module that just defined in an interface everything our feature could do and how it could interact with the rest of our code base. And then we were very prepared to build a no-op module that had absolutely no implementation in it. And then the remaining module was our actual implementation. And we could do anything we wanted in there effectively and safely because we knew with some simple flavor modules work, it was simply stripped out of prod. So then, when we go back to that original code, we now have to check to see, do we actually have this feature loaded up in any capacity? And we knew absolutely certain that when the user pressed the button, if somehow it accidentally got exposed, that literally nothing would happen. And that gave us a lot of confidence. Come on. There we go. So now we have a foundation, but we need to figure out what we're going to build. And more importantly, we need to figure out what we're not going to build. So once again, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I stop, I pause, and I step back. And I try and think, how have I solved this problem in the past? And the more I build apps at the companies I've been with, the more I see that the core source of how people get aligned is by looking at your product North Star. For us, this was, in our first early days, was empower users with a convenient, easy to use, and affordable way to get around their city. This laid out a couple things. It laid out what people problem, human-centric problem, are we trying to solve. But it also laid out, generally speaking, how we're going to go about it, which was scooter sharing. This ideally remains constant as your team is going to go through twists and turns. And we use this to turn to when we have questions about, does this new thing matter, A or B or not? The next thing we did was we laid out the golden path. The golden path I'm going to define as the central user experience to solve the core user problem in optimal conditions. But what I really mean is, here's how we're going to do what we're going to do in as squinty-eyes things as possible. So don't worry about error cases. Don't worry about the new user experience, or if you have an empty state. We're just thinking about, in an optimal world, how we're going to solve that human problem. So let me walk you through it. So our Lyft Scooters golden path, you open up the app, you've somehow found your way into the scooters feature, and you see a list of scooters around you. You click on one. You're like, cool, I'll take it. You hit reserve. It shows up as reserved. You walk up to the scooter. You hit the unlock button. It's unlocked, and you ride away. You've been riding for a while. You're like, cool, I'm done now. We open up a camera, take a photo of where you've parked it to show you've been a good parking citizen. And then we show you, great, here's your ride, this is how much you're going to pay for it, and then you rate your ride. Lyft does this a lot. But it also lets us understand how we can do better, if there's something wrong with the scooter, and help with maintenance. So, simple golden path, a lot of things were ignored here. But not only did it clearly outline what our feature was going to be, it really clearly outlined what it wasn't. And then we could look at it and say, does this solve our core product North Star? Is this going what we're after, or is this going for what we're after? And then we can look at the rest of the things, and it's really tempting. You've got an existing app out there, but you're building a new thing. You want to have everything you have in your existing app come with to your new feature. It's totally natural. For us, it was things like, share your ETA with friends so you can see how far the scooter ride you are, or set a destination and we can get you a route there, or like coupons or promos. But now we have a nice framework, because I can always tell you the engineering cost of building these features. But now that we have this North Star, now that we have this golden path, we can use that technical difficulty and weigh it against something else. So asking the question, does sharing an ETA really help the user with our North Star vision? And it didn't. So it wasn't like we weren't going to do it, but we knew what to prioritize at what moments. So we have this limited feature set. We have this North Star. We have this golden path. But we still have to come up with an architecture, something that the server and client can agree on that's going to get the user through this flow as we grow. We want something straightforward. We want something easy to reason about. But we also know products are naturally going to grow over time. So how do we account for that? I had an engineer tell me in a moment of wisdom, RJ, the bigger the feature, the more likely it'll take shape in unexpected ways. I actually think he just read it on Reddit, but it's a different point. But this is desire paths. This is the idea that some people, when I'm gonna lay concrete down this way, people are going to walk that way. But humans have a habit of going the way they want to go, and projects have a way of growing the way they want to grow. So I'm going to go through how this kind of worked here. We looked at this golden path, and we're like, all right, so you have this pre-in-ride thing where it's reserved, and then it's unlocked, and then you're riding. And then you have this ending state where you take a photo, you get this end ride screen, and then you go rate your ride. Great. I have a great idea for an architecture. So we're going to have this in-ride enum, and it's going to have 3 values, locked, unlocked, or active. And we're going to have this post-ride enum, where it's going to be like, are you parking it right now? Is it dropped off? Or is you riding your ride right now? It's fair. Totally normal. But there's actually a lot of hidden complexity here when we really dove into it. There's a lot of edge cases every single time you're going to transfer from one state to the other. And there was a lot of times we were transferring. And there's a lot of hidden complexity being generated here. Are we really optimizing our product right now? Do we really know how this is going to grow? And we wanted something overall that we could really, really easily reason about. And that we could know that anytime we sent a sequence of events to our client from the server, we knew what state we were going to land in. So we tried again. And instead, we said, what if we just had one state here? And instead, we just ride status. And then we had your reserve state. And then we just had a big active state that encompassed a couple different screens. And then we had dropped off. And this was all the subscreens were generated by user actions and not the server. So we knew how to differentiate them on the client, but the server didn't need to care. And this is a great example of how we pulled in other stakeholders, because it was only after talking to the designer that we realized unlocked really isn't its own state. It's just active, but you haven't moved yet. And we knew how to detect that. So from there, we just had a really easy enum we were able to pass to the client to flow you through this state. And then we can look at it and understand how this would go. But not only that, this wasn't just the server and client engineers figuring out this architecture. We had the designers in there. We had the product managers in there, participating in this discussion, refining it. We had the firmware engineers telling us what the scooters were capable of. And this wasn't just because we really liked involving them. It was because their feedback was critical in keeping this architecture simple, knowing how it might grow. But the best part of it was we were all on the same page. We all knew what we were dealing with, and when we needed to make changes, they didn't need to come to us to ask. They knew what the system was capable of. So we've got the architecture. We've got everything laid out, but we actually need to code. And we have a ton to code, and we only have 2 months to do it. So we needed some strategies to make the most of every day of actually coding. And so that's where reimagine over reinventing comes in. And it's treating your code base like Lego blocks. You know, early on when we were talking about this, there were some very valid questions thrown out there. You know, what if we had just made a separate app? Or like, oh my God, this is going to be a huge launch. Got to be ready for 10 million people. Because like, honestly, it's natural. When you have really tight timelines and you want to disassociate all risk, you just want to build it all yourself. We all believe we could code better than our predecessors. You know, conversely, if you're expecting this to be a mega launch, you want to have the best protection behind you that this is going to go smoothly. But honestly, the solution that worked best for us and the experiences I've had is somewhere in between, where you find creative ways to reuse the architecture at your disposal. You know, when I talk about leveraging things, us as client engineers, we talk about building a separate app. Look, we already have build systems in place. We already have a network stack, an authentication layer. We have databases. I mean, the list just goes on. There's no way I could have possibly shipped this without the amazing work of my coworkers. But to be fair, for anyone who asked, why don't we just build a separate app, they didn't know this. So I had a responsibility. I had to explain why we were going to stay within the Lyft app, why those decisions were well-founded, and it wasn't a hard sell when we laid it out like this. But honestly, they had a fair point. There are times when you can get slowed down. And it's not just when you reuse something, but it's when you get dependent on someone else to change for you. But you do have options. And let me just walk you through one of the examples of what we did here. So we really wanted the app to instantly show whenever the scooter changed state. When it was unlocking and then it finished unlocking, we just wanted it to show up straight in the phone. And right now, or back then, we didn't really have a great push infrastructure for our client. It polled. And it was on the roadmap of the network team, and we had this tough call. Do we get dependent on them to add push just for this feature? Or what else can we do? So we used the same techniques as before. We stepped back, we looked at the trade-offs, we tried some different options, and then we had this evaluation where we looked and said, does this serve our user? Does this go towards our North Star vision? Is this solving a people problem? And what we found was polling may not be optimal, but if we were to restart the poller and adjust the polling rate, depending on the conditions we suspected were happening, we really did get that smooth experience we were hoping for. This decoupled us from that architecture and let us move forward, but it still let us be able to move that in later if that did come about. The other thing about creative reuse is that we use encapsulation whenever we could. So here's another example. The PM comes to me and just goes, you know, RJ, can we add a driver's license scanner to the app? That'd be really great when they first need to start. And honestly, like, that sounds really hard, and I don't have a lot of time. So I wasn't going to try and push back, but I just wanted to hear more, and the PM just casually mentioned that, I think the driver team already did something like this. And, so I dug around, and then I found, honestly, I was super surprised. We had this barcode view already made. So it's a great lesson in composition over inheritance, because we had this barcode view, we had this UI that the designer showed, and I was able to go, okay, look, I had a camera overlay view on top of it. We're going to wrap it up in a controller to show how these things go together. We're going to have some business logic on top of that specific to us, and then we're going to wrap it all in some component that we can reuse in our code base that never actually changes any line of my coworker's code. So then I go back to my PM, and I'm just like, done. They were happy. I don't actually know if they knew how hard it was to find it, but yeah. But honestly, seriously, when it comes to just what's going to take up the most amount of time when you're building out features, for me, it is just the UI work. It is the amount of time I spend moving pixels around, adjusting a layout. So if I can find any way at all structurally within my team to do this less, I'm going to find it. And this was the perfect time to us to talk about our Lyft product language. There was a talk yesterday on design systems. I am so for them. So, for those of you who didn't go to yesterday, a design system, or for us, the Lyft product language, is a comprehensive library of UI elements designed for usability, consistency, and accessibility. But for us, what it really meant was designer shows me mocks. It could be on a piece of paper or whatever. I glance at it, and I know exactly what colors. I know exactly what sizes. I know exactly what buttons, layout, grid size. Because it's always the same. It always fits our system. But it does way more. Because we get things like loading states. We get things like disabled, enabled. We get accessibility. We get internationalization. It fits with the rest of our app already. And honestly, there's these fantastic APIs my coworkers had already developed. So I was super excited about the Lyft product language. But there's also one more reason, and that's, seriously, I am so excited. This is just a bit of a humble brag, honestly, but the designers at Lyft truly care about Android, so much so that we actually won a Material Design Award, which I have a photo, I guess, of me like gushing over it when I saw it. But it's super cool because designers at Lyft, outside of the Material or the Lyft product language, will actually just hand me iOS mocks all the time, and they don't even know it, but they work perfectly on Android. So that's why a lot of the mocks you'll see here are actually iOS. We never made Android mocks because we didn't need them. And it wasn't as if I felt like I was missing anything or they were doing Android a disservice. We had honestly a language that spoke for both. So this is how we actually used it to speed up time. Here's it in action. Designer gives me some mocks. I look at them, cool, they look great. But I'm just like, oh, hold up. This button, this is a little, is this part of the Lyft product language spec? And the designer is just like, yeah, I just kind of did my own thing today. Okay. So great. I love it. It looks great, seriously. But it's probably going to take me like a week or so to really get this new button you gave me polished up. But what do you think about the LPL version? Because if we went with that, it'd be probably 20 minutes. This 30-second interaction with my designer, and he goes, oh yeah, totally cool. Thanks for asking. I go back to my desk. I use the LPL component, and this happened all the time. This was a routine thing where we would go iterate on it, look at it, try and get it more to conform to that spec, and it supercharged things. So I'm going to pause and just be like, thank you, Lyft design team, because it's always important to thank your coworkers for being awesome. But there were times when we couldn't actually reuse anything, and there was actually a hidden strategy here, because you can actually focus your energy really well when you've reused everything else. And I think the map bubbles are a great story of this. We had these bubbles on the map to show you where a scooter was. Great. But we had tons of scooters, and so we had to cluster them, which is normal, but we kind of backed ourselves into the corner with our APIs. The Lyft app never really had clusters before. We do a lot of custom things on the map, but unfortunately those layers of abstraction kind of removed the ability for clustering to work. But once again, we talk about product principles. We knew this as part of our golden path. We knew this was crucial to our user experience. So we couldn't not build it. We had to find a way to make this work. So when I'm in a time crunch and I have to write my own code, I have a couple things I'm going to optimize for. I truly believe that readable, predictable, and works well enough code is vastly greater than stuff that's complex but works in an asymptotic situation. I think we all kind of know what we're talking about. And for me, that meant n² time. Part of that degree I have just felt terrible, that I knew it could be done at n log n, but I didn't. I did not do it in that. But I took a little while to think about it, and I actually kind of turned that frown upside down. I felt really good about it because this code was easy to read, it was easy to understand, and it was easy to replace when the better thing came around. But the other thing that made this work is that we knew the data set size we were working with. And premature optimization is the root of all evil, at least that's the saying. And it's true here that we could have spent so much longer polishing this, but it totally wasn't necessary. So finally, we're going to talk about launch, which is listening, learning, and launching what matters. Because whenever you build a feature that's hidden until you make a big release, you have so many extra things to consider. As we're getting closer to launch, we heard a couple big questions come up. Like, first off, are we still sure we're building the right thing? And then the biggest one is, are we actually ready for this? So when it comes to building the right thing as you're getting close to launch, there's another way of asking, like, is this really what matters to our users? And when we had a bunch of questions that were kind of not part of this product vision, but stuff that emerged from it. Things like, do they actually understand this new reserved feature that we have? Our competitors don't have it yet. Do they really understand the unlock and locking of it? But then finally, kind of an existential question is like, do they really feel like this naturally fits with the rest of the Lyft product? We're a rideshare company after all. You know, if you already have a launched feature, this is a very different story because you have, iterative releasing. You have the ability to A/B test. And you not only have the ability to iteratively measure how your users' behavior and preferences change over time, but it also catches bugs so much earlier. But we didn't have that. We needed another process. And this is where I'm also going to say, how do you learn when you're not live? And that is user research, usability testing, and foundational research. And this is where you leverage, if you do have a research team, you leverage them. Early on, we didn't have a research team, and I actually put on a lab coat and went out to the Caltrain station and recruited myself. But having this team was tremendous because we actually did user studies where we would go out in the wild and understand people's preferences around scooters. But not only that, as we got closer to launch, when we actually had an app to show people, we brought them into the office, we sat them down and had them use the app to see if the UI itself made sense, and that refined things. I'm also going to pause and say, thank you, Lyft research team, because this was truly not possible without their tireless effort as well. So then the last thing, are we ready for launch day? Usually the answer is no, you're never really ready, but we're going to do what we can. Because this entire time we were building in parallel, which meant the client, the server, the firmware, and the hardware were all works in progress at the same time. But we still had to build it. So how do you do that? We took an onion-like mocking approach, where every single layer of this was mocked until it was ready. So when we had the client, when it was the only thing that was ready, we just basically took all of our mocks and just slowly moved them down the client stack until we got as far as we could go, which is like the raw network layer. It was great, especially with RxJava. You can return streams early, and you can use your client development until the server is finally ready. So you have to remember to remove that line of code. But then once you do, now you can integrate the server. So now you've got a server that's up and running. What are you going to do? Because we don't have the rest of the stack. And so that's where scripting came in. And we wrote so many scripts as client engineers to get the server to go through different sequences of states to make sure the client was behaving in the ways we'd expected. And to call out from earlier, if we had a more complex client-server architecture, this would have been even harder. But we were able to run through this golden path on every PR we submitted, us as engineers, because this script was so good, or it was so comprehensive. It was my only contribution to the Lyft server code base. And since I did Python for like 6 years, I'm actually not It's not my proudest Python code. So we're almost there. We almost have everything integrated. But we always know that as best you unit test every one of your pieces, when you put them together, they're not always going to work. So we actually locked ourselves in a room, the firmware, client, server people, and said we're not leaving until we get this all working. And it was about 8 hours, but we had to tweak everything. None of this worked on the first try. It took a lot of patience. But honestly, like that, when everything comes together is like some of the most satisfying experiences I've ever had. We still have this big question though, which is like, are we actually ready for launch? And I think us as client engineers know the reality, which is if you want to be flexible, you have to acknowledge something, that an APK in the wild is not flexible. All that flexibility you have to add from the server. And that means things like feature flagging, which we tried to do heavily on a lot of our different features within this larger one. We had things like configuration flags to overall configure the experience where a feature flag itself was inappropriate. And then finally, one of server infrastructure that was super cool was the ability to arbitrarily override any single Android resource string we were loading, which may or may not have happened on launch day that I got a string wrong. So I quickly logged onto the console and replaced it. I had gotten the message wrong when we went out of service. So now it says, even two-wheelers need their beauty rest. So then actually on launch day, after we had pushed the big red button, I got in a truck and I drove out into the field of Denver to see how users were using it. Not only was it like super emotionally satisfying, but we actually debugged real issues we found that day. And I was so terrified at first. You saw me fling out my laptop in the middle of the square. And then I found out it was just a configuration issue with our experiment setup, so it was all good. But more importantly, being there for these launches was crucial at helping us better understand our users. It helped us refine that North Star vision we were working towards, and then prioritize that backlog of features we had left out. This wasn't our final launch. We've been launching since then. And the first one is always the most rough. So being there in person to understand it helps the humans around you refine that process as well. So the key takeaways I want you to get from this, other than I look pretty cool riding that scooter, I don't want any of this to be discouraging, because I actually think that being a product engineer is thrilling. It's super cool, but it comes with risks. It comes as a process, and it's something that I'm always learning. But I really hope that everyone here embraces it and joins me. Because I honestly think that if you stay simple, you stay lean, you reimagine over reinventing, and you launch what matters, that you as a product engineer are going to do amazing things. Thank you.